Elena Vasquez stood at the massive window of her ship, watching the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. Before her stretched the crystal towers of Nexus Prime, home to the Galactic Council. The towers reached up into the purple sky like frozen lightning, each one glowing with soft light that seemed to come from within the crystal itself. "Ambassador, we're ready for landing," called Captain Rivers from behind her. Elena nodded but couldn't look away from the view. After 300 years of watching the stars alone, humanity was finally going to meet their neighbors. The landing pad was huge, bigger than most Earth cities. As Elena's ship touched down, she saw other vessels from across the galaxy. Some looked like metal flowers, others like flowing water made solid. One ship seemed to be made of pure light that hurt to look at directly. Elena walked down the ramp wearing Earth's finest diplomatic uniform. The blue fabric bore the symbol of united humanity, a simple Earth surrounded by stars. She felt the weight of 7 billion people on her shoulders. Every human alive was counting on her to make this first meeting perfect. A group of aliens waited for her. Elena had studied their pictures for months, but seeing them in person was different. The Kythera looked like tall, thin humans made of silver mist. They moved like dancers, never quite touching the ground. The Thraxians were built like bears but walked upright, their dark fur covering thick muscles. Their eyes were kind, not fierce like Elena had expected from the galaxy's famous warrior race. But it was the void minds that made Elena's breath catch. They looked like floating jellyfish made of stars, their bodies see-through except for the lights that pulsed inside them. When they spoke, their voices came from everywhere at once. "Welcome, daughter of Earth," said the largest void mind. Its voice was like hearing music underwater. "I am Keeper Thal. We have watched your species for so long. You have no idea how happy we are to finally meet you." Elena bowed as she had practiced. "Thank you for this honor. Humanity is ready to join the galactic community." Keeper Thal's lights pulsed in what Elena hoped was pleasure. "Your species has shown such wisdom, such restraint. In all our watching, we have never seen a people grow so peacefully." Elena felt pride warm her chest. Humanity had worked hard to put their violent past behind them. The last war on Earth had ended 50 years ago. Since then, humans had focused on science, art, and exploration. They had proven they could be peaceful. "Come," said a Kythera whose name was Silthera. Her voice sounded like wind chimes. "Elder Zixthul is waiting." They walked through hallways that changed color as they passed. The walls showed scenes from different worlds: purple oceans under twin suns, forests where the trees grew downward from floating islands, cities that existed only as pure thought. Elena tried not to stare, but everything was so beautiful. The council chamber was enormous. The ceiling was so high Elena couldn't see it. Hundreds of beings sat in floating chairs arranged in circles that rose up like a flower. At the center sat the inner circle, the 5 oldest and wisest beings in the galaxy. Elder Zixthul looked like a tree made of gold and silver, his branches reaching up toward the hidden ceiling. When he spoke, his voice was like the sound of wind through ancient forests. "Elena Vasquez of Earth," he said, and Elena felt her name spoken by that voice was the most important moment of her life. "Your species has passed every test. You have shown that you can grow without destroying. You have learned to live in peace. This is rare in the galaxy, very rare." Elena stepped forward. The ceremony was beginning. "Elder Zixthul, humanity is honored to be here. We offer our friendship to all species of the Council." "And we accept," said the Elder. "But friendship is not enough. We offer you membership. We offer you a place among the stars." The chamber filled with music that had no source. Lights danced through the air like living things. Elena felt tears on her cheeks as she realized this was really happening. Humanity was no longer alone. "We have prepared a gift for your people," continued Elder Zixthul. A hologram appeared showing a section of space. 17 star systems, all uninhabited. Perfect worlds for your people to grow and learn. Clean planets with good air and water. Moons rich with metals for your cities. This is yours, freely given. Elena stared at the hologram. 17 systems, hundreds of worlds. Room for humanity to grow for thousands of years. "This is too generous," she whispered. "Not at all," laughed Keeper Thal. "Young species need room to grow. These systems are far from the busy trade routes. Your people can develop in peace without the chaos of galactic politics." Something about the way he said it made Elena pause, but the moment was too perfect to question. Elder Zixthul was extending a golden branch toward her. On the end was a crystal that pulsed with inner light. "The signing crystal," explained Silthera. "Touch it and humanity joins the Galactic Council. Your people become part of something greater than any one world." Elena reached out. The crystal was warm under her fingers. Light flowed from it into her hand, up her arm, filling her whole body with warmth. The hologram changed, showing the 17 systems now marked with Earth's symbol. "It is done," said Elder Zixthul. "Welcome to the galaxy, children of Earth." The chamber exploded in celebration. Music filled the air from 1,000 different worlds. Lights danced between the floating chairs. Elena was surrounded by beings congratulating her in languages she didn't understand, but somehow felt the meaning of. A Thraxian captain clapped her on the shoulder with a hand that could have crushed stones. "Your people will love the outer systems," he said. "Quiet, peaceful, perfect for a species that likes to avoid trouble." Again, Elena felt that small nagging feeling, but she pushed it away. This was the greatest day in human history. Earth's children would finally walk among the stars as equals. Later, as Elena was shown to her guest quarters, she passed a group of alien diplomats talking in low voices. She caught only fragments of their conversation, spoken in the common galactic language she was still learning. Another batch for the outer rim. Remarkable how well the peaceful approach works. Should keep them busy for a few centuries at least. Milena stopped walking. "Excuse me," she called. "What did you say about the outer rim?" The aliens looked startled. "Oh, nothing important, Ambassador," said one quickly. "Just discussing trade routes. Very boring council business." They hurried away, leaving Elena standing alone in the glowing hallway. She told herself she had misunderstood. Her grasp of galactic common was still weak. They had probably been talking about something completely different. But as she lay in her bed that night looking out at the alien stars, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The celebration had been perfect. Too perfect. The gift of 17 systems was too generous. The compliments about humanity's peaceful nature had been too strong. Elena had been a diplomat long enough to know when people were trying too hard to make her happy. And she had been human long enough to know that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. But surely she was wrong. Surely the greatest moment in human history wasn't built on lies. Outside her window, the alien stars glittered like diamonds, keeping their secrets. Dr. Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead and looked up at the alien sun. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and he was standing on the 3rd planet of their new territory. The world was beautiful. Purple grass under a golden sky with mountains that sparkled like jewels. But it was also completely empty. That was what bothered Marcus. In all his years studying ancient civilizations on Earth, he had learned one thing. Good planets didn't stay empty by accident. Someone had lived here once. The question was what happened to them. "Dr. Chen," called his assistant Sarah Kim. "You need to see this." Marcus walked over to where Sarah was working. She had been using ground scanning equipment to map what lay beneath the surface. The screen showed something that made Marcus's heart race. "There's a structure down there," Sarah said, pointing at the display. "Big one. Maybe 200 meters across. It's deep, but we can reach it." Marcus nodded. "Start digging." It took 3 days to reach the structure. What they found was a building made of the same crystal as the council towers, but black instead of clear. The walls were covered in symbols that looked familiar, though Marcus couldn't place them at first. "It's a data storage facility," said Sarah after running her scanner over the walls. "Still active. Still powered after who knows how long." Marcus touched one of the symbol panels. It lit up under his hand, and suddenly the air filled with floating images. Star charts. Pictures of aliens he didn't recognize, and text in languages that made his head hurt to read. "Wait," Sarah said, staring at one display. "I know these symbols. They're similar to the ones on the Council integration documents. This is Galactic Common, but an old version." Marcus felt his hands start to shake. "Can you translate it?" Sarah worked for hours, her translation program slowly making sense of the ancient text. As words appeared on her screen, Marcus felt sick. "Integration Protocol 247, Sarah read out loud. "Species designation Terran. Homeworld Terra 3 Outer Spiral Arm. Initial assessment, bipedal aggressive technology level 7. Recommendation, standard placement in outer rim territories for monitoring and control." Marcus stared at the words. Terran, that sounds like human, Sarah finished. It sounds like human, they kept reading. The files told a story that made Marcus want to scream. The Terrans had been welcomed into the Galactic Council 800 years ago. They had been given a territory in the Outer Rim, 17 systems just like humanity. They had been praised for their peaceful nature and their wisdom, but the files went deeper. Marcus read reports about how the Terrans had started asking questions. They had wanted to know why they couldn't visit the inner systems. They had wondered why their technology requests were always denied. They had begun to suspect they were being treated differently than other council members. Look at this, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. She had found a video file. When she played it, Marcus saw creatures that looked exactly like humans standing in what looked exactly like the council chamber. A being that looked exactly like Elena was touching a crystal, just like the one humanity had touched 6 months ago. The Terrans, Marcus whispered. They were human, or close enough that it doesn't matter. The files continued. Marcus read about how the council had grown concerned about Terran questions. There were memos about managing the Terran problem, reports about how to keep them contained. And then, near the end, files about something called Population Adjustment Protocol. Sarah found the final entries. Biological agent deployed to Terran primary colonies, she read. Initial mortality rate 97%. Survivors showing expected psychological breakdown. Recommend full sterilization of remaining populations to prevent spread of aggressive ideologies. Marcus sat down hard on the crystal floor. The Terrans hadn't died from a plague. They had been murdered. Wiped out completely because they had asked too many questions. Marcus, Sarah said, and her voice was different now. Scared. Look at this last file. Marcus looked at the screen. The final entry was dated just 7 months ago, 1 month before humanity's integration ceremony. New species identified. Human. Homeworld, Earth, outer spiral arm. Initial assessment. Bipedal aggressive technology level 7. Physical and genetic markers 99.7% identical to previous Terran specimens. Recommendation. Standard integration protocol with enhanced monitoring. Previous Terran experience suggests this species may require population adjustment protocol if containment fails. The file continued. Note. Humans show remarkable similarity to Terrans in both biology and behavior patterns. Council psychologists recommend emphasizing peaceful nature in integration ceremony to encourage compliance. If humans follow expected Terran development pattern, population adjustment may be required within 50-100 years. Marcus felt the world spin around him. Humanity hadn't been chosen because they were special. They had been chosen because they were replacements. The Council had found another species that looked like the Terrans they had murdered, and they planned to use humans the same way. We have to tell someone, Sarah said. Marcus was already pulling out his communication device, but as he started to send a message to Earth, warning lights began flashing throughout the crystal building. Security breach detected, said a voice in perfect galactic common. Unauthorized access to classified archives. Council enforcement en route. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand. Run! They ran through the crystal corridors as the building sealed itself behind them. Emergency protocols activated throughout the structure, erasing files and locking down data that had waited 800 years to be found. But it was too late. Marcus had recorded everything on his personal scanner. Every file, every video, every proof that humanity had been lied to from the very beginning. As their ship lifted off from the dead planet, Marcus sent an encrypted message back to Earth. The message contained everything they had found. The truth about the Terrans, the truth about why humanity had really been welcomed into the Council, and the truth about what the Council planned to do when humans started asking the wrong questions. On Earth, Elena Vasquez received the message while she was preparing for another diplomatic meeting with Council representatives. She read Marcus's report 3 times before she believed it. Then she sat in her office for a long time, staring out at the stars and thinking about 17 empty systems and compliments that had been too generous. Elena had been right to trust her instincts. The greatest moment in human history had been built on lies, but now humanity knew the truth. The question was what they were going to do about it. Elena looked at her reflection in the dark window. 6 months ago, She had been proud to represent humanity to the galaxy. Now she realized she hadn't been a diplomat at all. She had been a signature on a death warrant, but Elena was human. And humans, she was about to remind the galaxy, had never been good at accepting death warrants quietly. She reached for her communication panel. It was time to call Earth. It was time to tell her species what had really happened in that crystal chamber. And it was time for humanity to decide whether they were going to die like the Terrans, or do something that had never been done before. Outside her window, the alien stars seemed to flicker, as if they too were nervous about what came next. The emergency meeting on Earth lasted 3 days. In a secure bunker beneath the capital, every human leader on the planet gathered around a table that had once been used to prevent nuclear war. Now it was being used to prevent something far worse. President Martinez looked older than she had a week ago. The weight of truth had aged her. So we're all clear on what Dr. Chen found? Nods around the table. Admiral Morrison, head of Earth's Space Forces, spoke first. The Terrans were exactly like us. The Council gave them the same deal, the same territory, the same lies. When the Terrans got suspicious, the Council killed them all. And now we're the replacement Terrans, said General Wei, commander of Earth's ground forces. The question is what we do about it. Elena had returned from Nexus Prime the day before. She still wore her diplomatic uniform, but the pride was gone from her face. The Council expects us to follow the same pattern as the Terrans. They think we'll be happy in our 17 systems for maybe 50 years. Then we'll start asking questions. Then they'll kill us too. Director Hassan of Earth Intelligence spread photos across the table. We've been monitoring Council communications since Dr. Chen's discovery. They're already talking about us. There are betting pools on how long it takes before we require adjustment. President Martinez felt sick. They're betting on when they'll commit genocide. The average bet is 47 years, Director Hassan said quietly. Admiral Morrison slammed her hand on the table. Then we fight. We've got the best space navy humanity has ever built. We make them pay for every ship, every planet, every life. With what? Asked Dr. Reeves from the Science Council. They have technology we can't even understand. Ships that travel faster than light in ways our physics says is impossible. Weapons that can destroy planets. The Terrans tried to fight, Elena said. I found records of their final battles in the Council archives. They lasted 6 months against Council forces. The room fell silent. General Wei studied the star charts on the wall. So we can't run, we can't hide, and we can't fight. What exactly can we do? Elena stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of the city where 7 billion humans lived their lives, not knowing they had been sentenced to death by creatures they had celebrated as friends. There is one thing the Council doesn't expect, she said slowly. What's that? President Martinez asked. Elena turned back to the table. They don't expect us to say no, Admiral Morrison frowned. What do you mean? Think about it, Elena said. Every species they've ever dealt with has followed the same pattern. Integration, compliance, questions, resistance, elimination. They have a system. They know how it works because it's worked for thousands of years. General Wei was starting to understand. You're saying we don't play their game at all? Exactly. Elena's voice was getting stronger. We don't negotiate. We don't complain. We don't ask for better treatment or demand explanations. We just stop participating. Dr. Reeves looked confused. How do you stop participating in galactic civilization? Easy, said Director Hassan, and Elena could see he was following her logic. We act like they don't exist, Elena nodded. The Council's power comes from the fact that everyone recognizes their authority. But what if we just don't? What if we treat their laws and their borders and their demands like they're meaningless? President Martinez was thinking hard. That's not resistance. That's something else entirely. It's rejection, Elena said. Complete rejection of the entire system they've built. Admiral Morrison was looking at the star charts now. We've been thinking about this wrong. We've been thinking like the Terrans. How do we work within their system? How do we make them treat us better? How do we earn our place? But what if we don't want a place in their system? What if we build our own? General Wei finished. The room was quiet except for the hum of air recyclers. Outside, night was falling over Earth. Soon the stars would be visible, including the ones that marked humanity's assigned territory. It won't be easy, Elena said. They'll try to stop us. Economic pressure first, then diplomatic isolation, then probably military action. Let them try, Admiral Morrison said. Our ships are designed for war. Theirs are designed for intimidation. There's a difference. Director Hassan was already making notes. We'll need to pull back from all Council territories immediately. Recall every human ship, every diplomatic mission, every trade delegation. And then, President Martinez asked. Elena smiled for the first time in days. Then we show them what humans do when someone tries to put us in a cage. The decision was made that night. By morning, every human colony, every space station, every exploration ship in the galaxy received the same message. It was simple and direct, broadcast in 17 languages but meaning the same thing in all of them. Council protocols are void. Humanity chooses its own path. The reaction from Nexus Prime was swift. Elder Zixthul himself sent a message to Earth within hours. Elena listened to it in the same chamber where humanity had made their choice. Ambassador Vasquez, came the ancient voice that had once filled her with awe. We are concerned about this message from Earth. Surely there has been some misunderstanding. We invite humanity to send representatives to discuss any concerns through proper council channels. Elena looked around the table at her fellow humans. President Martinez nodded. Elena keyed the response transmitter. Her voice was calm, professional, and absolutely final. Elder Zixthul, there has been no misunderstanding. Humanity rejects council authority. We will no longer participate in council systems, follow council laws, or recognize council territorial claims. Our response to your invitation is simple. Elena paused. In that pause was the weight of every human who had ever defied authority. Every revolution, every rebellion, every time someone had stood up and said enough. No. The transmission ended. Elena turned off the communicator and looked at her colleagues. Well, that's done. Admiral Morrison was grinning. Think they got the message? Oh, they got it, Elena said. The question is whether they understand what it means. General Wei was studying tactical displays. They're going to try to force us back into line. Economic warfare first. Let them, President Martinez said. We've been preparing for isolation since the day we left Earth. Our colonies are self-sufficient. Our ships can manufacture what they need from asteroid resources. Director Hassan looked up from his intelligence reports. They're calling emergency council sessions. The other species are confused. Apparently no one has ever just walked away before. Elena wasn't surprised. In a galaxy where power came from belonging to the council, the idea of simply choosing not to belong was unthinkable. It was like a slave deciding they weren't a slave anymore just because they said so, but that was exactly what humanity was doing. And it was about to teach the galaxy something it had forgotten, that freedom wasn't something you were given by authority. It was something you took and kept taking no matter who tried to stop you. Outside the windows of Earth's command center, the stars were shining. Somewhere among them, the Galactic Council was learning what it meant when humans said no, and humanity was just getting started. 3 months had passed since humanity said no, and the galaxy was learning what that word meant. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Horizons, watching her sensors track a council enforcement fleet trying to intercept them. The 12 council ships were fast and heavily armed, built to intimidate rebellious species back into line. But they had a problem. They couldn't find what they were chasing. Contact in 30 seconds, reported her navigation officer. Should we jump out? Sarah shook her head. No, hold course. The council ships dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the New Horizons. Sarah's crew tensed, but she remained calm. She had been expecting this. Human vessel, came the transmission from the lead council ship. The voice belonged to Commander Thekvar, a Thraxian who had once seemed friendly during the integration ceremonies. Now he sounded frustrated. You are in violation of Council Space Regulation 47 Alpha. This system is restricted to Council survey teams only. Sarah opened a channel. Commander Thekvar, this is Captain Chen. We don't recognize Council regulations anymore. We're conducting our own survey. There was a long pause. Captain, you cannot simply ignore galactic law. Watch us, Sarah said, and cut the transmission. What happened next would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. The New Horizons didn't fight the Council ships. It didn't run from them. It simply continued its mission as if they weren't there. Sarah's ship scanned the system's planets, deployed research probes, and began mining operations on a mineral-rich asteroid. The Council ships followed, sending increasingly angry messages that Sarah didn't bother to answer. For 3 days, the standoff continued. The Council fleet couldn't attack without provocation. Their own laws prevented them from starting wars. But they also couldn't leave because that would mean admitting defeat. On the 4th day, Sarah finished her survey and calmly jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Council ships alone in empty space. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Human ships appeared wherever they wanted, did whatever they came to do, and left when they were finished. They didn't ask permission. They didn't acknowledge borders. They simply acted as if the entire Council system didn't exist. The psychological impact was devastating. On Nexus Prime, Elder Zixthol convened emergency session after emergency session. The great crystal chamber that had once been filled with the music of celebration now echoed with angry voices and confused. Questions? They're ignoring us, reported Commander Vexthal of the Enforcement Division. Our ships intercept them and they just continue working. They act like we're not even there. Keeper Thal's lights flickered with agitation. This is unprecedented. No species has ever simply rejected our authority. Because no species has ever been stupid enough to try, growled General Huxtar of the Thraxian Defense Force. They have 17 systems. We have 17,000. They cannot win this game. But Elder Zixthol was beginning to understand that humanity wasn't playing a game. They were doing something far more dangerous. They were proving that the game itself was optional. The reports continued to flow in. Human mining operations in forbidden systems. Human trade deals with species the Council had marked as quarantined. Human exploration ships mapping territory that had been restricted for millennia. Most disturbing of all were the questions. Other species were starting to ask why certain systems were forbidden, why some technologies were restricted, why they needed Council permission to trade with each other. The Void Minds were the first to demand answers. Keeper Thal himself stood before the inner circle, his star-filled body pulsing with light that made the other Council members uncomfortable. We want to see the archives, Thal announced. All of them, including the ones that require inner circle authorization. Elder Zixthal's branches rustled with what might have been fear. Keeper Thal, those archives contain sensitive information about galactic security. Then we should know about it, Thal replied. We are Council members, not subjects. Other species began making similar demands. The Cathera wanted to know why their genetic modification requests were always denied. The Thraxians questioned why their military was restricted to certain weapon types. The younger species demanded access to technologies they had been told were too dangerous for their level of development. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council faced something it had never encountered: widespread questioning of its own authority. Elder Zixthal made a decision that would prove to be a mistake. Instead of addressing the questions, he decided to make an example of humanity. If the other species saw what happened to rebels, they would stop asking uncomfortable questions. Implement economic sanctions, he ordered. Full trade embargo. No Council species may trade with human colonies. The sanctions were devastating in their scope. Overnight, humanity was cut off from galactic trade networks that had existed for thousands of years. Food shipments stopped. Technology transfers ended. Even basic medical supplies were embargoed. The Council expected humanity to come begging for mercy within weeks. They were disappointed. Admiral Morrison read the embargo announcement from her command center on Luna and laughed. They still don't understand us. Earth's colonies had been designed for independence from the beginning. Human paranoia about alien contact had led to a policy of complete self-sufficiency for all major settlements. Every colony could feed itself, manufacture its own equipment, and defend its own territory. The embargo was an inconvenience, not a catastrophe, but humanity's response was something the Council had never seen before. Instead of trying to negotiate the end of sanctions, human ships began appearing in systems where embargoed Council species lived. "This is Captain Williams of the merchant vessel Free Trader," came a transmission to the Zalani colonies. "We understand the Council has forbidden you from trading with us. We don't recognize their authority over your decisions. If you want to trade, we're here." Species after species discovered that humanity was offering them something the Council never had: choice. The Zilani had been denied access to advanced medical technology for centuries because the Council deemed them not ready for it. Human traders offered it freely. The Corvin had been restricted to primitive mining equipment because their aggressive tendencies made advanced technology dangerous. Human engineers taught them how to build their own industrial complexes. The Paxti had been forbidden from leaving their home system because they were still developing appropriate social structures. Human explorers offered to show them the galaxy. For the first time in their history, species that had been kept as children by the Council were being treated as equals by someone else. The effect was electric. Trade deals were signed in secret. Technologies were shared without Council approval. Young species that had never questioned their restrictions began to wonder why they had restrictions at all. Reports reached Elder Zixthul that made his ancient wood creak with stress. Half the species in the galaxy were now trading with humanity despite the embargo. Worse, they were starting to trade with each other without Council oversight. "The humans are destroying everything we've built," reported Director Hexnall of Council Intelligence. "Our entire system depends on controlled development and regulated trade. They're showing everyone that the regulations are optional." Elder Zixthul made his second mistake. "Prepare the fleet. If economic pressure won't work, we'll use military force." General Huxtar looked uncomfortable. "Elder, our forces haven't fought a real war in over 1,000 years. We're designed for intimidation, not combat." "And the humans?" General Huxtar's thick fur bristled. "Their ships are built for war. All of them. Even their merchant vessels carry enough firepower to destroy most of our enforcement craft." Elder Zixthul's branches drooped. For the first time in his long life, he was facing a problem that couldn't be solved by Council votes and regulation. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had made the Council's authority meaningless simply by choosing not to recognize it. And now half the galaxy was learning to make the same choice. The greatest empire in galactic history was crumbling, and it was all because one species had looked at absolute power and said a single simple word: no. The revolution began not with violence, but with truth. Dr. Marcus Chen's discovery had been just the beginning. Human exploration teams, now free to investigate without Council oversight, were uncovering hidden data caches across the galaxy. Each find revealed more of the Council's dark history. On the fourth planet of the Cathara home system, archaeologist teams found records showing how the silver-skinned people had once been as varied in appearance as humans. The Council had forced genetic standardization on them 1,000 years ago, claiming it was for improved efficiency. The Cathara had forgotten they had ever looked different. In the ruins of a dead world in Thraxian space, researchers discovered the truth about the warrior race's famous honor code. It wasn't ancient tradition. It was psychological conditioning imposed by the Council to make them better soldiers. The real Thraxian culture had been about art and philosophy, not war. The Void Minds learned that their greatest scientific achievements had been stolen. Technologies they thought they had invented were actually discoveries made by extinct species, claimed by the Council and given to the Void Minds as rewards for good behavior. Elena Vasquez stood before the United Nations Assembly on Earth, reading from reports that arrived daily from across the galaxy. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from every human colony, every space station, every ship in the fleet. "The pattern is the same everywhere we look," Elena said. "The Council didn't unite the galaxy. They conquered it, slowly, carefully over thousands of years. They found species, lied to them, controlled them, and when those species became inconvenient, they eliminated them." President Martinez spoke from the front row. "How many species have they destroyed?" Elena looked down at her datapad. "Our best estimate is 47 sentient species completely wiped out over the last 3,000 years. Another 112 reduced to single-planet populations and kept as pets." The hall fell silent. Even the humans who had lived through the revelation of the Terran genocide were shocked by the scale of the Council's crimes. "And now other species are learning the truth," Elena continued. "The Cathara have demanded access to their genetic archives. The Thraxians are rediscovering their real history. The Void Minds are reconstructing the technologies that were stolen from them." Admiral Morrison stood up. "What's the Council's response?" Elena's expression was grim. "Elder Zixthul sent a message yesterday. He's offering humanity a new deal: full Council membership, unrestricted access to all technologies, a seat on the inner circle." All we have to do is stop sharing information with other species. The hall erupted in angry voices. General Way's shout cut through the noise. They're trying to buy us off. Elena nodded. It gets worse. The message included video files showing Council battle fleets mobilizing. If we don't accept their offer, they're prepared to use military force against any species that continues to support us. President Martinez stood up, and the hall fell quiet. What did you tell them? Elena smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. I told them humanity's position hasn't changed. Our answer is still no. The Council's final message to Earth arrived 3 days later. Elder Zixthal's image appeared on every screen in human space simultaneously. The ancient being looked older than ever, his golden branches dulled with age and stress. People of Earth, he began, and his voice carried the weight of millennia. You have forced us to actions we would have preferred to avoid. Your species has shown a dangerous tendency toward chaos and rebellion. You have corrupted other council members with false information and encouraged them to break laws that have kept the galaxy peaceful for thousands of years. Elena watched the transmission. From her office on Earth, around her, the greatest minds of humanity were gathered to hear what would probably be the Council's declaration of war. We offer you one final chance, Elder Zixthal continued. Return to your assigned territory. Cease all unauthorized activities. Accept the guidance of the Council as your betters. Do this and you will be allowed to live in peace. The transmission paused. When Elder Zixthal spoke again, his voice was hard as stone. Refuse and we will do to you what we did to the Terrans. Your choice, humans. Submission or extinction. The transmission ended. Elena looked around the room at the faces of her colleagues. President Martinez, Admiral Morrison, General Wei, Dr. Chen, the leaders of a species that had been sentenced to death twice in their short galactic history. Well, Elena said quietly, I suppose we should send a response. She activated the communication system. Her message would go not just to Elder Zixthal, but to every species in the galaxy. It was time for the universe to hear humanity's final answer. Elder Zixthal, Elena began, her voice steady and clear. You mistake our nature. We didn't reject your council to build a better one. We rejected the very concept that any species needs permission to exist freely among the stars. She paused, thinking of the Terrans who had died for asking questions, of the 47 species erased from history, of the hundreds of worlds kept in chains by lies. You offer us submission or extinction, Elena continued, but you've forgotten something important about humans. We've always been very bad at accepting either. Elena stood up and her voice filled with the strength of a species that had climbed out of caves and reached for the stars. You want to know our choice? Here it is. We choose freedom, not just for humanity, but for every species you've deceived, controlled, and enslaved. We choose truth over your comfortable lies. We choose growth over your stagnant peace. We choose to fight rather than kneel. Elena looked directly into the camera, speaking not just to Elder Zixthal but to every being in the galaxy who had ever wondered if there was an alternative to council rule. You can try to destroy us, Elder. You can send your fleets and your weapons and your threats, but you cannot kill an idea whose time has come. And the idea is this, that freedom is not something granted by authority, but something claimed by courage. Elena's voice rose to fill the room. So bring your war, Elder Zixthal. Bring your ancient fleets and your terrible weapons. Come and try to put the galaxy back in its cage. But know this, you will not be fighting just humanity. You will be fighting every species that has remembered what it means to choose its own path. Elena turned off the transmission and looked around the room. There, I think that covers our position. Admiral Morrison was grinning. Think they'll accept our terms? Elena laughed. I don't think we offered any terms. 5 years later, the Galactic Council still existed, but only as a shadow of its former power. Elder Zixthal and the Inner Circle ruled perhaps a dozen core worlds where the oldest species clung to the familiar comfort of being told what to do. The rest of the galaxy had moved on. The Kithra had restored their genetic diversity and were exploring art forms that had been banned for centuries. The Thraxians had put down their weapons and picked up paintbrushes, rediscovering the philosophical traditions their ancestors had created. The Void Minds were sharing technologies freely with anyone who wanted to learn. New species were discovered almost daily by independent exploration fleets. Instead of being integrated into a controlling system, They were welcomed as equals by people who remembered what it was like to be lied to by those who claimed to know better. Elena stood in her garden on Earth, watching her grandchildren play under alien stars that no longer seemed so alien. In the distance, ships from a dozen different species came and went from Earth's orbital stations, carrying trade goods, cultural exchanges, and the simple freedom to go wherever they chose. A message arrived on her personal communicator. It was from Captain Sarah Chen, now commanding the exploration vessel Terran Memorial. Investigating reports of yet another hidden council data cache. Found something you'll want to see, Sarah's message read. It's a council planning document from about 100 years ago. They were already identifying species to replace us when our useful period ended. Apparently they had their eye on something called the Nexari. Elena smiled and typed back. Better go warn them. She looked up at the stars again, thinking about a single word that had changed everything. Such a simple thing, really. Just 2 letters. But it had been enough to remind the galaxy of something that tyrants always forgot. That the most powerful force in the universe wasn't weapons or threats or ancient authority. It was the simple courage to say no. And once someone said it, others remembered they could say it too. Elena's youngest granddaughter ran up to her holding a drawing she had made in school. It showed humans and aliens working together on a space station, all of them smiling. What do you think, Grandma? The little girl asked. Elena looked at the picture of a galaxy where different species chose to cooperate instead of being forced to submit. Where exploration was driven by curiosity instead of conquest. Where the only authority that mattered was the one people chose to recognize. I think it's perfect, Elena said. And in the distance, another ship launched toward the stars, carrying people who had learned that freedom was not something you asked for. It was something you took, and kept and shared with anyone brave enough to reach for it. The galaxy was finally growing up. And it had all started with one small word from a stubborn species that had never been very good at doing what they were told. No.